There are moments in life that seem ordinary on the surface, yet somehow linger in your heart long after they've passed. A quiet sunrise that makes you stop in your tracks. A familiar song that suddenly carries a deeper meaning. A walk through your neighborhood that feels different, even though nothing around you has changed. Sometimes, these moments arrive during a particular season of the year, not because the calendar itself holds magical power, but because it offers us a chance to pause, to notice, to reflect. Imagine if the days between August 5th and August 12th became that kind of invitation. For many people, the turning of summer brings a subtle shift. The bright energy of long days begins to soften. The year quietly moves toward a new chapter. Nature reminds us that every season has its own rhythm, and perhaps we do too. You may notice yourself asking questions that didn't seem important a few weeks ago. Why have certain relationships changed? Why do old routines suddenly feel empty? Why does your heart seem to crave more silence than noise? These questions don't necessarily mean that something extraordinary is happening outside of you. They may simply be signs that something inside you is asking for your attention. Many people describe periods like this as a kind of awakening, not a dramatic event, but a gradual unfolding. A growing awareness of what truly matters, a willingness to see life from a different perspective. Perhaps you felt it without having words for it. Maybe you've become more aware of your thoughts. Maybe you've started noticing beauty in places you once overlooked. Or maybe you've simply sensed that you're no longer the same person you were a year ago. If any of that feels familiar, this symbolic window of reflection may offer an opportunity to slow down and listen more closely to your inner life. Because sometimes the biggest changes don't begin with loud announcements. They begin with a whisper. And over the next few minutes, we'll explore 5 meaningful signs that may suggest you're entering a season of greater awareness, personal growth, and deeper connection with yourself. Not as predictions, not as guarantees, but as gentle invitations to reflect on your own journey. Every meaningful transformation has a beginning, yet the beginning rarely looks the way we expect. Movies often portray change as a dramatic breakthrough, a single conversation, one life-changing decision, or an unforgettable moment that alters everything overnight. Real life is usually much quieter. Growth often begins in ordinary moments. It begins when you choose to take a deep breath before reacting. It begins when you finally admit that something no longer fits the person you're becoming. It begins when you sit alone in silence and realize you've been ignoring your own heart for far too long. The period between August 5th and August 12th can serve as a powerful symbol of this kind of transition. Whether you see these dates as spiritually meaningful, emotionally significant, or simply as another week on the calendar, they offer something we often forget to give ourselves: permission to pause. Modern life encourages constant motion. There is always another notification, another deadline, another opinion competing for your attention. The louder the world becomes, the harder it can be to hear your own thoughts. That's why moments of intentional reflection matter. When you step back from constant distraction, something interesting begins to happen. You notice patterns. You recognize emotions that have been quietly waiting beneath the surface. You begin asking questions that aren't about achievement or productivity, but about meaning. Who am I becoming? What truly brings me peace? What kind of life do I want to create? Many traditions around the world describe these moments in different ways. Some call them spiritual awakenings. Others speak of personal transformation, mindfulness, or becoming more conscious of one's inner world. The labels matter far less than the experience itself. At its heart, an awakening isn't about becoming someone completely different. It's about becoming more fully yourself. That journey doesn't require perfection. It doesn't require having all the answers. It simply asks for honesty. Honesty about what brings you joy. Honesty about what drains your energy. Honesty about the dreams you've quietly carried for years. Sometimes that honesty feels exciting. Sometimes it's uncomfortable. And sometimes it's both at once. As you move through this symbolic week, you may discover that your greatest teacher isn't found in a book, a podcast, or someone else's advice. It may be found in your own willingness to listen. The first sign often appears so gently that many people overlook it. Instead of pushing you to do more, it invites you to do less. Have you ever noticed that when life becomes overwhelming, your deepest need isn't usually for more information? It's for more space. Many people who experience periods of personal growth describe an unexpected desire to slow down. Not because they've become lazy, not because they've lost ambition, but because constant busyness no longer feels satisfying. Imagine waking up one morning and deciding not to reach for your phone immediately. Instead, you sit quietly with your morning coffee. You watch the sunlight move across the room. For the first time in a long while, you simply exist without feeling the need to accomplish something. At first, it may feel unfamiliar, even uncomfortable. Our culture often celebrates speed. The faster you respond, the more productive you appear. The busier your schedule, the more successful you seem. Yet somewhere beneath all that movement, another voice may begin to emerge. A quieter voice. One that asks whether you're rushing through experiences you'll never have again. Perhaps you've started taking longer walks without a destination. Maybe you found yourself lingering outside after sunset, listening to the sounds of the evening. Or perhaps you've discovered that a few minutes of silence feel more refreshing than another hour spent scrolling through endless updates. These small choices may seem insignificant, but they can become meaningful acts of self-awareness. When mental noise begins to fade, your inner world often becomes easier to understand. You notice emotions before they become overwhelming. You recognize stress before it turns into exhaustion. You become more aware of the people, places, and habits that leave you feeling energized or depleted. This isn't about escaping life. It's about experiencing life more fully. Mindfulness isn't reserved for meditation retreats or mountain temples. It can happen while washing dishes, driving home after work, watering a garden, watching rain fall against a window. The present moment has always been available. Sometimes we simply forget to visit it. You may also notice that your intuition becomes easier to hear when your mind isn't constantly crowded. Intuition doesn't always arrive as a dramatic revelation. More often, it feels like a quiet sense of knowing, a gentle feeling that encourages you to call an old friend, to take a different route home, to say no to something that once felt impossible to decline, or to finally say yes to an opportunity you've been quietly avoiding. These moments don't need to be interpreted as supernatural. They can simply reflect what becomes possible when you create enough stillness to hear your own wisdom. Think about a lake on a windy day. When the surface is constantly disturbed, it's difficult to see what's beneath. But when the wind settles, the water becomes clear enough to reflect the sky. Our minds can be much the same. The quieter they become, the more clearly we see ourselves. Slowing down doesn't mean giving up on your dreams. In many cases, it helps you remember which dreams truly belong to you. Because not every goal you've been chasing was chosen by your heart. Some were inherited from expectations. Some were shaped by comparison. Some were built from fear rather than purpose. Stillness creates room to ask an important question. If no one else's opinion mattered, what kind of life would feel meaningful to me? There may not be an immediate answer. That's okay. Growth is rarely about finding instant certainty. It's about becoming comfortable enough to ask better questions. As this symbolic week continues, Slowing down may reveal something unexpected. Not just who you are, but who you've been trying to become all along. And once that awareness begins, another sign often follows. The habits, beliefs, and patterns that once felt familiar may suddenly no longer fit the person you're becoming. There comes a point in many journeys of personal growth when the life you've always known begins to feel strangely unfamiliar. Not because your surroundings have changed overnight, but because you have. Imagine putting on a favorite jacket you've worn for years. It once fit perfectly. It felt comfortable, safe, familiar. Then one day, without warning, it feels too small. The jacket didn't change, you did. Many people describe personal transformation in much the same way. Habits that once felt automatic suddenly begin to feel heavy. Conversations that used to entertain you leave you feeling drained. The opinions you once accepted without question no longer seem to match what your heart believes. This can be confusing. Sometimes it's even unsettling. You may wonder why you're losing interest in things that once brought excitement. Maybe you're no longer eager to prove yourself in every conversation. Maybe endless scrolling through social media no longer feels relaxing. Maybe you're beginning to value genuine connection over constant approval. These shifts don't necessarily mean you've become a different person. They may simply mean you're becoming more aware of what truly nourishes you. Growth often begins with discomfort. A seed must push through darkness before reaching the light. A butterfly cannot emerge without leaving its old form behind. Likewise, personal transformation often asks us to outgrow patterns that once helped us survive, but no longer help us thrive. Perhaps you've noticed yourself reacting differently during moments of conflict. Where you once argued to win, now you find yourself listening more carefully. Where you once carried resentment for months, you may discover a growing desire to let go, not because the pain wasn't real, but because carrying it no longer feels worth the cost. Healing doesn't erase the past, it changes your relationship with it. Imagine carrying a backpack filled with stones. Each stone represents an old belief. I'm not good enough. I have to make everyone happy. I'll never change. For years, you've carried this weight because it felt normal. Then one day, you stop. You open the backpack. You pick up one stone and ask yourself a simple question. Is this belief actually true? Sometimes the answer surprises you. Many of the stories we tell ourselves were written during moments of fear, disappointment, or uncertainty. They protected us once. But protection and limitation can look remarkably similar over time. As awareness grows, you begin rewriting those stories. Instead of saying, "I always fail," you remember the times you succeeded. Instead of believing you're unworthy of love, you begin recognizing the kindness you've shared with others, and perhaps the kindness you deserve in return. This process isn't instant. Some days you'll feel confident. Other days, old habits may quietly return. That doesn't mean you failed. Growth is rarely a straight line. Think of the ocean. The tide moves forward, then back. Yet with each cycle, the shoreline slowly changes. Your life often changes the same way. Progress isn't measured by perfection. It's measured by willingness. The willingness to pause before repeating an old reaction. The willingness to apologize when you're wrong. The willingness to forgive yourself for mistakes you've carried far too long. One of the most beautiful parts of this journey is realizing that you don't have to become someone else to live a more meaningful life. You simply have to stop pretending to be someone you're not. As this symbolic season invites reflection, you may find yourself releasing expectations that never truly belong to you. Perhaps you've spent years chasing someone else's definition of success. Perhaps you've hidden parts of yourself to avoid criticism. Perhaps you've remained in situations that no longer reflected your values because change felt frightening. Awareness gently asks a different question. What would happen if I trusted my authentic self a little more? The answer doesn't arrive all at once. It unfolds through small choices. Choosing honesty instead of pretending. Choosing rest instead of constant exhaustion. Choosing growth instead of familiarity. Little by little, the old patterns begin to loosen their grip. And in the space they leave behind, something remarkable begins to emerge. A new way of seeing, not only yourself, but the entire world around you. Perspective is a quiet kind of power. It doesn't always change your circumstances, but it can completely change your experience of them. Imagine standing at the base of a mountain. The climb ahead looks impossible. Every step feels steep. Every obstacle seems larger than life. Now imagine reaching the summit. The path that once felt overwhelming suddenly becomes part of a much bigger picture. The mountain didn't change, your perspective did. Many people notice this kind of shift during seasons of reflection. The challenges in their lives don't magically disappear. Bills still need to be paid, responsibilities still exist, unexpected disappointments still happen. Yet something inside begins to respond differently. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you may find yourself asking, "What can this experience teach me?" That single question can open an entirely new way of living. It doesn't deny pain. It doesn't pretend every hardship has an easy answer. Instead, it creates room for wisdom to grow alongside difficulty. Think back to a challenge that once felt impossible. Maybe it was losing a job, the end of a relationship, moving to a new city, or facing uncertainty about the future. At the time, it may have felt like the end of everything. Looking back now, perhaps you can see how that experience shaped strengths you didn't know you possessed. Resilience, patience, compassion, courage. Life has a remarkable way of revealing meaning in hindsight. Not because suffering is desirable, but because human beings are capable of finding purpose even in difficult chapters. Gratitude often grows from this new perspective, not the kind of gratitude that ignores problems, but the kind that notices beauty despite them. You begin appreciating ordinary moments, a conversation with someone you love, fresh air after a summer rain, the comfort of home, the laughter of children, the quiet peace of an evening walk. These moments may seem small, yet they quietly become the foundation of a meaningful life. Many people spend years waiting for extraordinary happiness, while overlooking the extraordinary gifts hidden inside ordinary days. Awareness gently changes that. You stop rushing through life. You begin noticing it. Another part of this shift often involves forgiveness. Forgiveness can be one of the most misunderstood words in personal growth. It doesn't mean pretending someone never hurt you. It doesn't require forgetting painful experiences, and it certainly doesn't mean accepting harmful behavior. Sometimes forgiveness simply means deciding that someone else's actions will no longer control your emotional future. It's choosing freedom over endless resentment. That freedom can also extend toward yourself. How many mistakes have you continued punishing yourself for long after everyone else moved on? How many moments have you replayed, wishing you could rewrite them? Imagine speaking to yourself with the same kindness you'd offer a close friend. You wouldn't constantly remind them of every failure, you'd remind them how far they've come. Perhaps it's time to offer yourself that same grace. As your perspective continues to evolve, another realization often appears. You don't have to control everything to live with confidence. There will always be unanswered questions, unexpected detours, moments when life doesn't unfold according to your plans. Yet peace becomes possible when you stop expecting certainty before taking your next step. Instead of demanding that the entire road be visible, you begin trusting the light that's already in front of you. One decision, one conversation, one act of courage at a time. This way of living doesn't eliminate fear. It simply keeps fear from making every decision. Many people describe this as feeling lighter, not because life became easier, but because they stopped carrying burdens that were never theirs to hold. Perspective quietly transforms the ordinary. The same sunrise you've seen hundreds of times suddenly feels breathtaking. The same family dinner becomes something to treasure instead of rushing through. The same quiet evening becomes an opportunity to reconnect with yourself. Nothing outside has changed, yet somehow everything feels different. As this symbolic period of reflection continues, this new perspective naturally leads to another beautiful shift. Instead of being pulled toward constant noise and conflict, you begin feeling drawn toward something you've been searching for all along. Peace. There is a quiet moment that many people experience during periods of personal growth. It isn't loud. It doesn't arrive with fireworks or dramatic announcements. It often begins with a simple realization. You're tired. Not just physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. You realize you've spent too much energy trying to convince people who don't want to understand you. You've worried about opinions that don't define your worth. You've replayed arguments long after they ended. And somewhere along the way, you've mistaken constant activity for a meaningful life. Then something begins to change. You start protecting your peace, not because you've stopped caring about others, but because you finally started caring about yourself too. Many people notice this shift during seasons of reflection. They become less interested in proving they're right and more interested in understanding. Less attracted to drama and more drawn to quiet conversations that leave everyone feeling heard. Imagine standing beside two rivers. One rushes violently over rocks, loud and unpredictable. The other moves steadily, calm and clear. Both are powerful, but only one invites you to sit beside it for hours. Inner peace works much the same way. It doesn't remove life's challenges, it changes how you move through them. Perhaps you've started saying no without feeling guilty. Maybe you've realized that protecting your time isn't selfish, it's healthy. You can't pour from an empty cup. And yet so many people spend years trying. They say yes to every request. They answer every message immediately. They carry responsibilities that were never theirs to carry. Eventually, exhaustion begins to feel normal. Awareness gently interrupts that pattern. It reminds you that boundaries aren't walls, they're doors. You decide what enters your life and what doesn't. Healthy boundaries don't push people away. They create space for healthier relationships. When you respect your own needs, you become better able to show up with patience, kindness, and presence. Peace also changes the way you respond to conflict. There may have been a time when every disagreement felt like a battle to win. Now, you may pause before speaking. You listen. You breathe. You ask yourself a simple question. Will my next words create understanding or simply create more noise? Sometimes the strongest response isn't an argument. Sometimes it's silence. Not the silence of avoidance, the silence of wisdom. The kind that recognizes every invitation to fight doesn't require your acceptance. This doesn't mean becoming passive. It means becoming intentional. You choose where your energy goes. You stop watering weeds and begin nurturing the flowers. As your inner world grows calmer, you may also notice changes in the people you're drawn toward. Conversations become deeper. Friendships become more genuine. You value honesty over popularity, authenticity over performance, presence over perfection. There is something deeply freeing about no longer needing to wear a mask. You begin allowing yourself to be seen as you truly are, with your strengths, your imperfections, your hopes, your fears. Ironically, that's often when the strongest connections begin, because authenticity invites authenticity. Peace also reshapes your daily routines. Maybe you wake up a little earlier just to enjoy a few quiet minutes before the day begins. Maybe you spend less time consuming constant news and more time reading, journaling, walking, or simply sitting outside beneath the evening sky. These choices may appear small, yet over weeks and months, they become a different way of living. You begin discovering that peace isn't something waiting at the end of your journey. It's something you practice along the way. One calm breath, one thoughtful decision, one act of kindness at a time. And as peace becomes your foundation, another remarkable transformation often follows. You begin trusting the one voice that has always traveled with you, your own. Perhaps the greatest sign of personal awakening isn't seeing something new. It's finally believing that your own inner wisdom matters. For much of life, many of us look outside ourselves for every answer. We seek approval, advice, validation, permission. There's nothing wrong with learning from others. Wisdom can be found in books, mentors, family, and friends. But there comes a moment when you realize something important. No one else has lived your exact life. No one else has felt every joy you've celebrated or every challenge you've quietly carried. That means no one else can fully hear the quiet voice inside your heart. Only you can. Imagine standing at the edge of a forest trail. There are signs pointing in different directions. People around you each insist they know the best path. One says, "Go left." Another says, "Go right." A third tells you to turn back entirely. Then you become still. You notice something you hadn't before. A narrow path directly ahead. It isn't the loudest. It isn't the most popular. But something about it feels right. Choosing that path doesn't guarantee an easy journey. It simply reflects your willingness to trust your own discernment. Many people describe this as growing confidence. Not the confidence that believes you'll never fail. The confidence that believes you'll be able to learn, adapt, and continue even if you do. That's a very different kind of strength. It isn't based on certainty. It's based on resilience. You stop waiting until you feel fearless. You begin moving forward even while uncertainty remains. Think about every meaningful decision you've ever made. Starting a new career, moving to a different place, ending an unhealthy relationship, beginning a healthy one, learning a new skill. None of those moments came with absolute guarantees. Yet somehow, you found the courage to take the next step. Looking back, you may realize that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was choosing hope despite fear. That realization changes everything. You begin trusting that you can face future challenges just as you faced past ones. Not perfectly, but faithfully. Another beautiful change often appears here. You stop comparing your timeline to everyone else's. Comparison has a way of convincing us we're either too late or too far behind. But life isn't a race with a single finish line. Each person's story unfolds at its own pace. Some dreams bloom early. Others require years beneath the surface before anyone sees the first sign of growth. Neither journey is wrong. A tree doesn't question why the flower blooms first. The flower doesn't envy the mountain. Nature understands something we often forget. Everything has its season. Perhaps this symbolic window between August 5th and August 12th can remind you of that truth. Not as a promise that everything will suddenly change, but as an invitation to recognize how much has already changed within you. Maybe you're kinder than you were a year ago. Maybe you've learned to forgive more quickly. Maybe you've become more patient with yourself. Maybe you found the courage to ask for help when you need it. Those changes matter, even if no one else notices them, especially if no one else notices them. Because the deepest transformations often happen quietly, like dawn arriving before the world fully wakes. You may never receive applause for becoming more compassionate. No one hands out trophies for choosing patience instead of anger. Yet those invisible victories shape the person you become, little by little, day by day, choice by choice. Eventually, you realize something extraordinary. The life you've been searching for isn't waiting in some distant future. It's being created in the decisions you make today. Each act of kindness, each moment of honesty, each breath of gratitude, each step taken with courage. That is how purpose grows. Not all at once, but faithfully. And perhaps that's what awakening has always been. Not escaping your life, learning to live it more fully. As this journey comes to a close, take a quiet moment to reflect. Think back over these 5 signs. Were any of them familiar? Have you found yourself longing for stillness, outgrowing old patterns, seeing life through a gentler perspective, choosing peace more often than conflict, learning to trust yourself a little more with each passing day? If so, you don't need to interpret those experiences as proof of anything supernatural. They may simply be meaningful reminders that growth is already unfolding within you. Life doesn't always announce its most important chapters. Sometimes they begin in ordinary mornings, a thoughtful conversation, a difficult decision, a quiet walk beneath an evening sky. Transformation rarely arrives all at once. It's built through countless small moments that, over time, become a different way of living. Perhaps that's why symbolic seasons of reflection can be so valuable. They encourage us to pause long enough to notice what constant busyness often hides. Not because the calendar changes us, but because intentional awareness changes how we meet each new day. As you move beyond this week, carry these reflections with you. Choose one small act of kindness, one moment of gratitude, one honest conversation, one decision that honors the person you're becoming. Those simple choices have a remarkable way of shaping an extraordinary life. And if today's reflection resonated with you, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Which of these 5 signs spoke to you the most? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story may encourage someone else who is quietly walking a similar path. Please keep the conversation thoughtful and respectful, recognizing that each person's journey is unique. And if you enjoy reflective documentaries that explore mindfulness, personal growth, and meaningful ways of seeing life, consider subscribing so we can continue this journey together. Until next time, remember this. Sometimes the greatest changes happen so quietly that only your heart notices them at first. But those quiet changes often become the ones that shape your life the most. Because sometimes the greatest awakening isn't about discovering a new world, it's about seeing your own life with new eyes.